Alright, so this is Mr. Heichel. I'm back and I'm bringing you part 3 of Mastering the Biology STAAR Test. So again, this is the released 2017 Biology STAAR exam. I've been talking about strategies and the overall content needed to be successful. So let's start where we left off at with question 39. And it says, which diagram demonstrates how crossing over contributes to genetic variety during meiosis? Well, meiosis is cell division. So we got to look at what actually involves cells. Well, this is a monohybrid cross. So this involves alleles, not cells. This is, well, they're in the middle. The chromosomes are lined up in the middle. So this would be metaphase of mitosis. This is DNA being split and added, so this would be DNA replication, because we know that DNA is a double helix. So the only one that makes sense is going to be C, which is our right answer. And we know this is crossing over because we have two homologous pairs of chromosomes. Homologous just means homo means the same, and location means log or logos. So we see that this black one has a little gray tip, and this gray one now has a little black tip. So after they cross over, this is what we get. So this is the exchanging of genetic information. So let's say this was from mom, and this one came from dad. Well, this little snippet that got crossed over right here would be the traits that you'd favor your mom or your dad on. So that's what makes genetic variations, and it's a very vital part of natural selection. So number 40, the picture shows a contractual vacuole of a unicellular freshwater organism. The contractual vacuole regulates the flow of water into and out of the cell in an aquatic environment. What conditions cause the contractual vacuole to fill with water? Okay. So we know that there are two cellular processes that take place here. There's something called osmosis and diffusion, which is the movement of something from high concentration to low concentration. So osmosis moves solvent or water, and diffusion moves salt or the solute or the solute, however you want to say it. So this is essentially what this question is talking about. So if the water is greater outside of the cell, so let's say inside this cell we have 80% water, and outside the cell we have, let's say this is 96% water, and the other 4% is going to be salt, and the other 20% of this is going to be salt. So the only way water is going to get into this vacuole is if the concentration of water is greater, so that the water can rush in, because it goes from a high concentration to a low concentration. So 96 is higher than 80. If this was talking about shrinking, well, water would be rushing out, would cause it to shrink, or salt could rush in. So it has to be the concentration of water. It says nothing about temperature. Temperature doesn't have anything to do with it. It could be H, but again, we can eliminate J because of temperature. But if the water is the same, so let's say this is 50 and this is 50, well, the water is going to go in and it's going to go out at the same rate, so it can't be H either. So the answer has to be F, because it has to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. 41. The rocky material left behind by retreating glacier forms what's called a moraine. When primary succession occurs on a moraine, which life form helps create the soil by breaking down bare rock? All right. Well, when we talk about primary succession, we got to think about, okay, let's think about the wildfires that California recently had. Those are undergoing succession right now. So the land is bare. The first things that are going to come into bare land would be, the small grasses, the moss, the lichens, the stuff like that. Once those are there, then you're going to get bigger grasses. You're going to get little bushes, Sorry, I'm not an artist. And then the last thing you're going to get are going to be trees. Okay, the insects are always going to be there. The insects aren't going to break down anything. So the only answer that makes sense is the moss and lichens, which is B. Lichens is just it's essentially a mutualistic relationship between a moss and an algae. So it allows it to live in moist, typically moist environments that can be dry as well. You see it oftentimes on the side of trees, right around the ocean, the coastlines, lakes, rivers, those areas. 42. Organisms are classified today by using the Linnaeus system, and the following table shows taxonomic classification of 2 marine organisms along the Pacific coast. Taxonomic classification is important to marine biologists because it provides a way to, okay, well, if we look at these, we're going to compare a dolphin and a whale. Well, we're looking at this, we know it is kingdom, phylum, class, family, order, genus, and species. So King Philip came, sorry, I think I just told you that wrong. King Philip came over for good steak, good spaghetti, good whatever. All right. So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So I was thinking it right and I said it wrong, but this is the correct order. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So let's say, okay, well, whale to dolphin. Here we go. They both have the same kingdom. They are both part of the same phylum. They are both part of the same class, which is vertebrata. They're both same order. They're both same phylum. Same family, not phylum. Same what? Okay, so we're going to keep going down. We look at all this good stuff, and eventually we're going to come to the fact that by using all of this stuff, this is actually domain. They put a domain on here. So domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So they're all identical to the same family. It's where they get to the genus that they start to separate a little bit. So we use taxonomic classification to not only tell us where identify specific traits about traits and characteristics about animals and other living things, but it also shows us evolutionary relationships. Because if we know that a dolphin and a whale have everything above, including family, in common, that they must have had a common ancestor somewhere back in the day that gave them all of these same very familiar traits. So they're both animals. They both have, chordata means backbone. They have vertebrae, or they have backbones. They're mammals. Everything is very similar. So they had to have a common ancestor somewhere. So it's going to be J. We also use the taxonomic classification because it allows scientists from all over the world to know what they're talking about. So if they're talking about a horse isn't a horse in Spain. There's a totally different name for it. But if they use the Latin roots of the words, it's going to be the same animal. They're going to be talking about the exact same thing. 43. Proteins and carbohydrates have many functions in the body of an organism. Specific proteins and carbohydrates perform specific tasks. Information about a protein and a carbohydrate is given below. So it says ferritin. Ferritin is a protein containing iron, which is needed by all living things. Iron is found in hemoglobin and in cytochromes, which function in metabolism. And then it goes on to say that free iron can damage proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And then let's talk about glycogen. It says glycogen is a carbohydrate that consists of glucose molecules. It can be hydrolyzed as glucose as needed by an organism. So it says, how are ferritin and glycogen similar in their primary functions? Well, if we start eliminating questions, there's no real good way to start on this question, so I'm going to start by elimination. They don't store energy. Proteins aren't really good for energy. Carbohydrates are great for energy, but not so much proteins. They both support the structure of an organism. Kind of, but that's not their primary function. And they store genetic information. Neither of them are nucleic acids. Nucleic acids are the only things that store genetic information. So protein can be used as energy, but it's like the last energy source. Okay, it's not readily used by your body. They go carbohydrates first, and then they go fats. Then they would go proteins. So they both store materials needed by the organism. You need ferritin and glycogen in your body, and they both store it in very specific ways. So let me finish reviewing this question. So we know nucleic acids are like DNA and RNA. We know carbs are our short-term energy storage. We know that fats, or lipids, as a technical name, are long-term energy. And they also help support and cell membranes. And then lastly, we got proteins. Well, proteins are mainly, their main function is to make enzymes, which help things react faster. So enzymes help things react faster. So like if you drink lactase or lactose, lactose will be broken down by the enzyme called lactase. Enzymes are going to end in ASE, and they break down the oses. So lactase would break down lactose. A model of a biological process is shown. What is the purpose of this process? So right away we have mRNA. So mRNA makes amino acids, which in turn, a big group of amino acids together, those are going to make proteins, and it's going to occur in the ribosome. Well, if we know that mRNA makes amino acids, look at our answer right here. Okay, through the process of translation, it's going to convert the genetic code, which comes from our DNA. It's going to be transcribed into mRNA. And then that mRNA is going to take the information to the ribosome, translate it into an amino acid, which is going to eventually make a bunch of proteins. 45. Scientists conducted an investigation to study the possible effects of air pollution on chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B in plants. The scientists gathered the plants from polluted areas and unpolluted areas and then measured the presence of chlorophyll in 50 milligrams of plant leaves. The results are shown on the graph. And it says, what inference does this data support? So we've got a polluted area that doesn't have a lot, and we have an unpolluted area that has quite a bit more, if not double. So that's where I want to start. This isn't talking anything about gene expression. So we automatically know that that is not the right answer. Plants in polluted areas can adapt in order to survive. Well, yes, kinda. Let's see if there's a better answer. Because some of these questions, you're going to have to find the best answer. Not necessarily the right answer, but the best answer. Photosynthesis decreases in response to air pollution. Well, right away, we know we have pollution. It says air pollution, pollution, air pollution, polluted areas, unpolluted. So, this is measuring how much pigment they have in these polluted areas. So right away, that is the correct answer. And the graph supports that because we have polluted areas, and it's a lot less than the unpolluted areas. So that's going to be our correct answer. And we're going to rule out letter choice D because there is no, it's not mentioning cellular respiration. It's talking about photosynthesis because we're dealing with plants. Viruses can be transmitted through air, food, insect bites, and direct skin contact. Once a virus gains entry to the body, it invades the host cell in order to what? Since viruses are non-living. Viruses are non-living. It means they're not alive. If you go to the doctor and you have the flu, they can't give you any medicine for the flu. They're going to tell you, sorry, you just have to run it. We just have to let it run its course. We can treat the symptoms, but we can't treat the virus. It's because they're not living. So they don't have antibodies. They have no metabolism, no reproduction. They don't have the simple life processes that they need to be considered living. The only way they get to be considered reproductive or metabolic is if they invade our cells and turn our cells against us. They use the energy from our cells and our cells' mechanisms to help them reproduce. So that's essentially what our answer is going to be. They're not going to deactivate our host cell's defenses. They're not going to do that. They're actually going to activate our host cell's defenses. They're not going to grow their own antibodies. They're not going to metabolize host proteins. The only thing they're going to do is use our cellular processes so that they can replicate and essentially kill us from the inside out, use our cells against us. Takes us to 47. This table shows the survival rates of two types of beetles in the same environment over a period of 3 years. Which statement about the beetles in this environment is best supported by the data? So let's look at the data. Year 1, we got 78% green and 31% brown. Year 2, we got a lot more green and fewer brown. And then year 3, we have about the same amount as we had at year 1, and we have a lot less brown. So just by looking at this thing, we know that whatever environment we're in, the green beetle is surviving a lot better than the brown beetle. It does the same thing about mutations. It does the same thing about gene frequency among their populations. Literally all this chart is telling you is how well they're surviving and what color's doing the best. And we know that green beetles are surviving more than brown beetles. So it's going to be A. 48. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration both involve the use and release of gases. Which statement correctly identifies the role of gases in the two processes? All right, well, let's write down both reactions. So let's do cellular respiration first. So we know that when we respire, when our cells respire, we have to eat glucose. We also know that we need oxygen. So when we do this, we breathe out carbon dioxide and water vapor. So these are our gases, right? And this is also a gas. Plants is the same reaction, but it's just reversed. So we're going to flip the arrow like this. So plants need carbon dioxide from the air. They also need water. This arrow is going to be sunlight because they're going to take in a lot of sunlight. And they're going to make sugar. Sugar cane, romaine lettuce. You want to stay away from that right now because it's infected with the E. coli. But glucose, right? Plants are sweet, fruits are sweet. And then they're also going to let off oxygen as a byproduct or a waste product for photosynthesis. So now that we have the reactions, let's read the statements. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration both use carbon dioxide. Well, they don't, because cellular respiration uses glucose and oxygen. So that one's not right. Photosynthesis and respiration both use oxygen. Well, we use oxygen, but plants use carbon dioxide. And then cellular respiration uses oxygen and releases carbon dioxide, while photosynthesis uses carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. So there we go. Choice H would be our best answer. And let's go ahead and rule out J. Cellular respiration uses carbon dioxide. It doesn't use carbon dioxide. It uses oxygen. So cellular respiration is what humans do. Plants, it is photosynthesis. So plants and humans Essentially the same reaction, but it's just flip-flops. Cetacans are whales and their relatives. The diagram shows some fossils of cetacans, or however you say it. I'm going to say cetacans. I may be saying it wrong, but it's all right. So which statement provides the best evidence that Amblygalotus natans is an ancestor of Basilosaurus isis? Well, if we look at the structures in their legs, they all look very, very similar. And if we zoom in on this part right here, we see that it has a vestigial or no longer used leg. So those are what's called homologous structures. Homologous structure shows evidence of evolutionary relationships because they are the same structure, but they have a slightly different function. Think about human arms and penguins' wings. They're going to have an ulna and a reta, just like we do. They're going to have tarsals and metatarsals and carpals and metacarpals. They're going to have the same similar bone structure, but we use our arms a lot differently than penguins use their feet and their wings or their flippers. So, homologous structures show genetic ancestry. We can't see anything about nitrogen bases. We see no A's, T's, G's, or C's in this picture up above. It doesn't say where they were found. It just says they found some fossils. And then it does have the oldest and the youngest, but it doesn't say what layers they were found in or anything like that. So, and the oldest, youngest is larger than the oldest. They're all roughly the same size. But homologous structures show genetic evidence of evolution, of common ancestry. 50. We got 4 more to go. Hang in there. All right. A student studying interactions between body systems construct this table. The student plans to fill out the table with the phrases that describe an interaction between each pair of the systems. Which of these phrases could be placed in the position marked with an X? Okay. Well, we've got to figure out what the digestive system does and what the muscular system does. So we're going to draw a line where they meet. Okay? All right. Well, when we digest things, digestive is responsible for breaking down our food into usable nutrients. So when you eat that cheeseburger from Whataburger, it breaks down the beef, the protein, into all the vitamins and minerals. It breaks it down into the fats, the carbohydrates, the lipids, the enzymes, the proteins. It breaks it down so that our body can use it for something. Well, once it breaks it down, where's it going to take it? Well, it's going to take it to your muscle cells, because your muscle cells need those salts. They need those fats. They need those, they definitely need that sugar that you got from those French fries and that chocolate shake at Whataburger, so that they can function, because they're loaded with mitochondria in the muscle cells, so they've got to have it. So it's not going to provide nutrients to the kidney cells. The kidney cells are actually going to filter out the nutrients, provide nutrients to the brain cells. Well, the brain cells is part of the, it's going to be part of the nervous system, and nerve cells is also going to be part of the nervous system. So it's going to provide it to the muscular system, because that's the only feasible place for it to provide energy to. A student used a poster board to construct this model of a section of DNA. Which statement best describes this model of DNA? Well, we know that when DNA pairs up, G and C are complementary pairs, so that means they pair up with each other, and A and T pair up with each other. Well, they essentially rewrote the DNA model. So this G, technically, this should be a C, this should be a T, this should be an A. You do the opposite, is what it technically should look like. So the model is incorrect because the base pairs are incorrect. It contains it's not accurate. It doesn't show the double helix, but that's not necessarily required. And yeah, so the model is incorrect because the base pair model is incorrect. And that's just one of those you just kind of have to know what DNA pairs up with. So A for apple tree, and then G and C pair up with each other. Oh, here we go. More ecology. I just like ecology. So this is going to be quite a fun one. So we have a partial East Texas food web, and we're going to correctly classify these organisms. So when you're looking at a food web, the arrow points to the energy transfer. So for example, when a red-tailed hawk eats a striped skunk, the striped skunk is giving its energy to the red-tailed hawk. So let's start at the bottom. So the things that have no arrows pointing to them are going to be your producers. They produce all the energy because of photosynthesis. So those are going to be like your plants, your trees, your bushes, your grasses, stuff like that. So both of these are going to be trees. So they transfer their energy to these specific things. So these things that only have one arrow going to them, these are going to be what's called our primary consumers, because they only consume grass. They don't consume anything else. They only have one arrow going to them, so they only consume longleaf wood oats and water oats. I mean grass, obviously, and stuff like that. But according to this food web, that's all that they consume. So then we go up to the next level. Okay. Well, these next level things like the striped skunk and the great horned owls and Louisiana milk snakes, those are going to be our secondary consumers, because they only consume primary consumers, if that makes any sense. So, and I just noticed something here. These two are actually going to be in their own group, and those are going to be like our top level consumers, because they have more than one way to get their energy. So they eat only meat. Okay, they eat only meat. So let's take these now and let's match them up down here. It should be fairly easy. Well, F says that our producers are striped skunks, so let's throw F out. G says our producers are longleaf wood oats and water oaks, okay, and that our primary consumers are field sparrows, white-footed mice, okay, beetles, and ants. So far, so good. But then it goes on to say that, let's see, our secondary consumers are striped skunks, which they're not, which they are, Louisiana milk snakes, eastern gray squirrels. Okay, that's all still, that's not correct, because white-tailed deer only consume water oaks and wood oats. They're not up here. They don't consume other living things. So then let's go to H and J, and let's do the same thing. So H says that producers are longleaf wood oats and water oaks, which is true because they produce everything, and then has everything else is going to be correct. Our secondary consumers are going to be our striped skunks, which you can't see, Louisiana milk snakes, so it's going to be H is going to be our answer. And we can also rule out J because a beetle and an ant is not a primary or a producer. Ants and beetles are obviously eating the water oaks or the wood oats if they wanted to. Okay, so the arrow points to where the energy is flowing from. And remember from the Part 2 series, 10% of the energy is transferred through per level. So this would be like 1,000. The next level would be 10% of that would be 100, and then you go 10, and then you go 1. which is why you don't see a lot of top-level predators on this speedway. 53. Classifications of 4 trees are shown in the table. Which 2 trees are most closely related? So this goes back to King Philip came over for good state. So this comes back to kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So the more of these taxa, these taxonomic groups that they have in common, the more closely they are related. So we want to find the ones that have the same what? Well, obviously, these 2 have the same order. None of them have the same species. None of them have the same genus, and none of them have the same family. So, since these 2 have the same order, these 2 are going to be most closely related. So, that's going to be our answer. There's not a whole lot to that. You just have to know how to do it. All the other ones don't have the same order. So, wherever they have a commonality, if it goes and they all have the same order, family, and genus, whichever 2 had the same species would be closely related. Whichever 2 had the same genus would be closely related, so on and so forth. So the more level of specificity, the more closely they are related. And we're on our last one, ladies and gentlemen. So the Arctic cat fox inhabits northern areas of Northern America. The same Arctic fox is shown in the drawing at a different time of year. So what causes this change in fur color? Well, okay, so let's look at what the question's telling us. We know this is January and July, and it's in North America, so it's going to be colder here. Well, cold leads to what? Leads to snow. Okay, well, when the snow melts, we get rocky environments. Think of mountains. It's an Arctic fox, so it's probably up north. There's lots of rocks, lots of mountains. So the alleles for fur color change. Okay, well, your alleles don't necessarily change as you get older. So, for example, I have gray hair and I'm 34 years old. My alleles did not change to give me gray hair, but some kind of physical mutation or external environment stressors like stress or just life changed my hair gray. My alleles did not change. Your alleles don't change. That's your genetics. So those don't change. Gene expression for fur color is regulated by latitude. Well, this is the same fox. This has the same Arctic fox. So it has nothing to do with it. The Arctic fox has 2 traits for fur color that are determined at birth. Well, if it did, it would constantly have it. It'd have some black here, some black here, some black here. This would, whatever. It would be 2 different colors at birth. So the only one that makes sense is gene expression is regulated by temperature, because it mentions, well, it doesn't directly mention temperature, but you could determine that January is going to be colder than July in North America, because that's the continent you live on. So again, I know I went kind of fast. I struggled through tonight myself. This is the last one. I really hope this was informative and you learned more than just how to take the test. You learned a little bit of content and reviewed and refreshed your memory on everything you need to know biology. If you have any direct questions, feel free to ask me. Have a great day.